Hey fellas, just wanted to make a quick video show you what I'm affectionately calling the Reverend. That's right, my game table. Ryan asked me to make a video real quick, show you how the ups and downs that I went through to make the thing and how to convert my extra dining room table into a game table so you can learn from my mistakes but also maybe be inspired to do it yourself. So here we go. All right, here it is in all its glory. I think the first thing I would say is don't be afraid to call it okay woodworking. Don't call it fine woodworking. My goal was to make it as cheap as possible. At the moment, I'm at about $100 in. That's with wood and mistakes and maybe some finish and some screws here and there. The table, the playing surface underneath the deck is 6x3, and yeah, so I would say, so I bought these pieces of lumber right here are things I had, and they are, and it's almost petrified wood. It's so dry and stiff. But the rest is the cheapest pine I could find, and in certain scenarios it worked fine, and in other sections it's been a nightmare, and frankly I should have just spent the extra 25-50 bucks, and I'm probably going to have to go back and replace these panels that are glued together with biscuit joints, but you'll see why in just a second. And there is a rail system that runs underneath, also made of pine. And I'll show you that little detail as well once we get there. Okay, let's take a look at the top. So all of the lumber is 3/4 inch thick, and I'll explain why I use that here in a little bit. I used a table saw, a chop saw, a drill press, a belt sander for rough sanding. I had the blessing of having 2 orbital sanders, which was very nice and convenient because I used 50 grit, and then I went to 120, and then I went to 220. 220 is your friend. You want to go clear up to 220 at least, maybe even finer, especially on the pine, because as you put a finish on it, it'll, even after 220, it'll raise up the grain of the wood a little bit. So 220 is your friend. And I also used a biscuit joiner to join these planks together so that they were one solid, each pine is one solid piece. One tool I wish I would have used, would have made my life a lot easier, would be a planer. Get yourself a planer and plane all of it. Because if you buy the cheap pine, you're going to have to struggle. You're going to have to go to your local store, local hardware store, lumber store, and pick through all the boards. Find ones without twists, without bows, without bends. You might have to go back 2 or 3 times just to get a new supply of wood in. That did help me for sure. So keep that in mind. You're going to want to pick through the pine if you're going to go as cheap as I did. I would say, again, I probably should have spent a little bit more money on these, this portion of the table, and I probably will anyway. So one thing to consider in terms of how much you're actually putting on, here's a good side detail of my table. My table, the old table, actually ends right here, and so there's not very much knee height to begin with. And that kind of really dictated how high my table was going to be, because right now this sits at 31 inches, and all the players that I've had sit at the table think it's exactly right. Any more would be too high, and I couldn't take it out of the feet or the leg of the table, because that would have dropped this portion down on top of your knees, and that would have been uncomfortable. And I couldn't really remove this portion of the table inside here, because this actually helps the integrity of the table. So this is kind of where my table wound up, at 31 inches. but it's only 1.5 inches high. As a matter of fact, the planks sit in at only 3/4 high, and I'll show you that in a minute, which means even miniatures can't lay down, which is a problem. But it is what it is, and I kind of like it anyhow. One of my features that I've got on my table is this darker wood. That's just bits and pieces of this scrap. And that I did this detail because I actually made a mistake, and these boards were cut just too short, but it actually turned out pretty good because I think everyone kind of likes that corner detail. And for this one over here, this one actually moves to actually lift the plank up. This process could be improved on for sure, but it definitely works to get that plank up. But I also wanted to show you like some of the downfall of using this cheaper wood. When I first made this table, everything was as tight as possible. It was really quite tight. As a matter of fact, using this little feature was almost difficult because there was just hardly any room for it to move. But in 1.5 weeks, I mean, it looks fine on video and photos, and even kind of sitting here, I can adjust the planks just so left and right, and it looks fine. But in reality, in 1.5 weeks, I've developed, you know, this is my finger here, you know, this is my pinky. I mean, that's maybe somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch of space, because the pine planks dried out and actually started to shrink. I didn't expect that they needed to dry more. That's where I would have spent the extra $25-50. So I might go back in, I probably will, and redo these planks somehow with different kind of wood that's already dried, because I've got some considerable bowing now as they've dried that wasn't like this when it started. But there you have it. So this feature is pretty cool. It does it. It actually picks up the corner of the table just enough, or it does that, which is kind of a pain. That's why I say this could be improved a little bit just by making this a little bit longer. Making this little notch in here just a little bit longer would have worked perfectly. Thankfully though, for that 1/4 of an inch, I can come in here and I could just lift it up, and notice there's a little groove there for that first plank to catch. So here it is with half the top removed. I used some scrap that I had to actually put this table end in, which is nice because then you can put like snacks and stuff on top and not have anything slide underneath. But here's how you can see that these planks are sitting only 3/4 of an inch off the table surface, which is just not enough for a mini to fit under. So if I had my way, if I had to do it again, or if I had a better table to work with to begin with, this would have been too deep, and then this one on top. And you might be thinking to yourself, Jason, why didn't you just use a 2x4 underneath? I actually did think about doing that at first, but then I didn't like the 2x material that I got, and so then I just went with this. And like I said earlier, the people I've had at the table who sat down and played, this is the perfect height. I'm kind of tall, but normal sized people are like, this is the perfect height. Any higher and it would be too high. We'd be sitting with our shoulders all shrugged up. So 31 inches I think is probably your best bet, but it really depends on how high your chairs sit too. So take that into consideration. Again, I really was coming at this as doing this as cheaply as possible. I wasn't I wanted to do a good job, but I wasn't going to get hung up on perfection. I wasn't going to think of this as fine woodworking by any means. And that led to a couple of things that were kind of happy accidents, actually. And it turned out okay. I'm going to turn the camera around here so you can see. Hold on just a second. So as you can see in the corner detail here, because of these pieces that I cut too short and had to add this piece in, it was going to mean I had to cut a 90-degree angle in here, and that was just going to get ugly. So I left it just like this, knowing that this plank for that lift feature down there was going to need to be a very specific plank anyway. So if I did the same thing at the other end in regards to the corner, just by cutting the corners off, that way I had two planks that had to go specifically, and it has not been an issue. It hasn't been like, oh, what plank goes where? It's not that big a deal. But what doing this corner did, like this, helped hide the crimes of not square corners. Okay. There, it's pretty close. It's pretty close to a 6x3 playing surface. And as you can see by my 6x3 mats here, you can see it's just a little off, but this is kind of nice because it makes it very easy to peel up when I don't want the mat down. So that's kind of nice. Part of the other thing that I discovered is that the table underneath isn't level. There's actually a sway or a bow in the table itself. And so when I went to go put this down, if I take this mat out, you're actually able to see underneath the bottom layer there. Like, and during the day, you can see the light shine straight through. And that's one of my pieces of advice for you. Let the boards that are straight stay straight. You don't want to screw this down or glue this down to the table and then bow this, so that way your planks need to be bowed. Better to keep this straight and deal with this hole somehow. And my neoprene mat, it actually hides the crime of that hole really quite well. So you can't even really tell. Sitting here at the table, you can tell just a little bit, but really not that much. So that's that. Keep straight boards straight so that planks can go down nice and flat after you've planed them flat. For those of you who are obsessive compulsive, here comes the measuring. So you got 3/4 of an inch there. There is, and what is that? Maybe 1/4 of an inch for the planks to catch. And this is all essentially 1x4. You might ask, hey Jason, are those two separate rings of 1x4? The answer to that is yes. Could you have done it out of a 2x4, Jason? The answer is probably yes, if I wanted to route and use a router to route this out, as well as the feature underneath. I kind of like the stripy feature that the two things give me. And I like what is technically 3 3/4 inches that you can rest your arm on. Any narrower, I think it'd be kind of obnoxious. That is one thing I will say, when you go and you need to like pick up lumber and you think it needs to be so wide, make sure you actually measure, because that 1x12 over there is technically, so those are two 1x12s glued together. It's technically 1 and 11 1/4, which would make you short if you're trying to do specific math. So make sure you measure before you buy. And lastly, I have my little shells I'm still working on, and the rail system, which isn't finished yet, as in like there's no finished coat put on them. The rail system is probably the most difficult thing that I've had to figure out, but there's the side detail. Okay, and basically anywhere on this thing I could just do that and move it. Eventually there'll be a hole for cup holder in here, and then I'll build a couple that are double wide so that you can hold some game components on one of them. They come out real easy, just like so. Basically this is just a 3/4 inch piece of wood, of pine, and then this 3/4 inch piece of pine, actually this little striping here is a happy accident, I kind of like it. This is what the side detail of that pine looks like. Okay, don't disregard this little piece up here. It's all square. But when it's in there, it actually seats like this. And it took a lot of trial and error to get this as tight as I've got it. I want to say this is 45-degree angle cut in there, back cut. This is a 45-degree angle with then another blade width taken out straight at 90 degrees just to make it wide enough. And then I want to say that's a 45-degree angle taken out of the back side of that and sanded smooth. You can disregard this little piece right there. Just something I never took off, just kept it there. But the real trick is see how much of this actually sits. It's about 1/4 inch that actually sits on top of that shelf. There's a little give in this thing, which I don't know, I mean, I don't notice it. I'm not balancing anything important on there, and really maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of wiggle, but it comes out in and out easy enough. I've got the ends chopped off at 33 degrees just so that it didn't look awkward just sticking out. These are not glued in. These are just screwed in from the back side. I wanted it to have just a little bit of movement, I guess, because I was kind of concerned that I wouldn't be able to, that it needed just a little bit of wiggle. I think you could glue it in. I also wanted to be able to take it off really easy if for some reason this pine breaks. I didn't want to be stuck trying to chisel it off, so it's just screwed in there. Well, other than that, I think that's about it. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm more than happy to let you know what I ran into that might have been trouble, or maybe you're confused. How'd you make that work? The lift mechanism on the corner, basically I just drilled a hole, cut the head off a nail, and rounded off one side of it just to underneath the nail, so it had something to rock on. That's why it rocks up. And that nail is put into the corner of the pine, like right here, like this. Okay, so that way when you push on that one end, because it's rounded off over here just to under the nail, it rocks up and lifts that other end. But other than that, trying to think if there's anything else, and I can't think of anything. You can do it. It's easy. You can really do it. It's not that complicated. It really is. I know one thing I wanted to mention, like the edge, like when you buy 1x4 material, it kind of has a little bit, like there's one edge that's usually kind of sharper than the other. That's the edge I have on the inside. And then the rounded edge, I didn't feel like I needed to like use a router or anything. I just hit it with the 220 sandpaper just to really just take the very edge off. But I kind of like the sharp distinctive feature of it. Again, it's not fine woodworking. It's just getting yourself a game table, and it's nice to have. It's fun to have. I will probably go back and get better wood for the planks, and maybe do a reverse feature where it's darker wood for the big portions and use a lighter wood for the smaller stripes. I think that might be the way I'm going to go, and I might use this 1x4 material to do so. Yeah. Enjoy it. Hope you guys are having fun gaming. I'll talk to you later. Bye.